Hi, everybody. I'm
Hi,
Jackie
Jackie.
from the Let's Talk TEFL podcast, and Jennifer also from the Let's Talk TEFL podcast. You can also find me on eslactivity.org/podcast is where you can find the podcast info. And Jennifer is at Teach Travel Learn on YouTube, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. So we have a couple of viewers. Welcome, everybody. And yeah, please leave a comment. And oh, As Above Production says hello. Hi. Yeah, welcome. Um, so today we are going to discuss language and culture. And I know there's some pretty opposing viewpoints on this. And Jennifer and I just had a small discussion just right before we started this. And I don't think we disagree, but we definitely have some different ideas about it. Um, so I think I have a little story to start off with. So um, I taught English in Korea for 10 years, and I was part of a local organization, the COTESOL. It's like a teaching, like a professional development organization. And we were going to have like a regional conference, and the president of my chapter really wanted to do a language and culture um, conference. And I said, so what do you mean by that? Like cultural exchange or whatever? And her kind of view was like, no, as Americans and Canadians and whatever, we have to share our culture with the world and somehow transform the world through like sharing of our ideas and democracy and everything. And I was like, oh, like I just kind of felt like, oh my God, what is going on right now? I just thought it was so, to me, it was so distasteful. And I actually wanted nothing to do with that. I was like, why don't we just do, a conference on like teaching ESL speaking or like how to teach writing or like any thing that wasn't so ridiculous as like we have to share our superior culture to the world. I just felt so horrified by it that I actually ended up just saying, I want nothing to do with this. You can do whatever you're going to do, but I'm not having any part of this. So that actually got me really thinking about it. Like, where do language and culture intersect? So, Jennifer, what are your thoughts on things like that? I know
Well,
that's kind of an extreme example of it, but
yeah. Well, I think language and culture have a very strong intersection, but I think there needs to be an exchange of cultural knowledge and experience and whatever. Like we, as visitors to a country, need to be just as curious as you might want your students to be about where you've come from. You know, it needs to be an exchange of information, like not just this is my experience, this is my cultural missionary work or whatever. It's, this is where I've come from, this is what I've experienced, and now that I've modeled the language used to tell about that, why don't you tell me your experiences, where you've come from, the things that are important in your culture, whatever. Because if you're going to go to another country, you need to be curious about that country. You need to be
mhm.
curious about other people, how other people live their lives. Otherwise, stay home.
Yeah, I actually like love learning about the Korean holidays, and my students, just one funny kind of story from Korea, how language and culture are so interconnected. Was that Koreans, when I first got there, would always like say in English to me, "Did you eat rice for like lunch or for dinner?" And I'd always say, "No, I had a sandwich," or like, "No, I had pasta for dinner," or like whatever, something like that. And their response was always just like, "Oh, okay," and it was just like very awkward, like they didn't know what to say. And I only realized after, once I started learning Korean. In Korean, the phrase is "밥 먹었어요," which means like "Have you eaten rice?" is the literal translation, but it actually means "Did you eat? Are you well? Are you good?" Because rice is like Koreans would just eat rice with every meal generally, and it's not a meal if it doesn't include rice. So it's like I understood it after that. They were just asking me, did you eat? How are you doing? Kind of like just a basic greeting like that. So then I learned to always just answer, oh, yes, I had rice, even if I didn't have rice. So it's like language and culture can never be separated. So things like that. But Yeah, I agree that it's all about a cultural exchange. So like me learning things like that, I think my students love telling me about it and love sharing, helping me understand their culture.
Yeah, definitely. You're generally speaking, your students will always love to tell you about things that they may not expect you to know about. Or if
Mhm.
it's something like, did you eat rice? They may be super
Yeah.
excited to learn that that has a different meaning or a different context in a different language because it's such a an ingrained idiom that they may not think about it, in the same
Mhm.
way that someone who maybe self studied English wouldn't necessarily understand that if I say, how are you? The correct answer is some variation of, I'm fine.
Good.
It is not,
Yeah.
my boyfriend just broke up with me. I think I'm about to get fired and kicked out of my house. And I'm gonna go over there and get as drunk as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And now let's talk about this job interview.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so there are so many parts of culture that are kind of inextricable from the language and vice versa, I think. But definitely the cultural stuff that you take into the classroom needs to be done in the spirit of a knowledge exchange and not one of missionary work or spreading the superiority, for sure.
So how would you bring culture into the classroom? Um, yeah, just what are some like ways that you do that in kind of a sensitive way, I guess? Obviously, you wouldn't be insensitive, but what are some like just some advice or thoughts for other teachers who want to be, sensitive to that?
Well, the reason that I was thinking about this week in particular is that it's Mardi Gras this
Mhm.
week. It was Tuesday was Mardi Gras, which where I'm from is quite a big holiday. We get 2 days off of school for it. There's parades for a couple of weeks leading up to it. We have king cakes that we eat. Um, and like we have a whole bunch of little traditions that go with Mardi Gras. But in other parts of the US and in other parts of the English speaking world, nobody knows what it is. Or,
Mhm.
as I was quite surprised to find out, in Australia, it's like Gay Pride Week.
Oh, wow.
They like Mardi
Interesting.
Gras is the big gay celebration,
Yeah.
and, which I thought was kind of funny because it's a
Yeah.
Catholic holiday. Like it's specifically religious, you know. And,
Mm.
anyway, we'll just keep any sort of Catholic jokes quietly to the side. Not appropriate.
Yeah.
Um, but
Mm.
so at Mardi Gras, I would usually tell my students something about that. And then, that we would talk about like what are some holiday maybe that you have in this town or this part of Korea or this part of the country that other areas don't have. Like
Mhm.
some hyper regionalized tradition or holiday or cultural experience. And obviously, as YouTube became more common and popular, then I could show them videos
Mhm.
because most people, even people that are familiar with like New Orleans Mardi Gras, like the big city Mardi Gras with the parades and throwing beads and
Mhm.
whatever. In the small towns, you actually people ride around on horses and chase after chickens, and like there's this whole crazy
Sounds so
other
fun.
aspect of the holiday. And so the
Yeah.
students would always like they thought that was great, watching
Yeah.
100 people on horseback riding down the street. And then when they get to a house, get off the horses and chase after some chickens.
I kind of love that idea of like sharing some of the less popular holidays with students because once students kind of get to like an intermediate or advanced level, they've honestly talked about the weather and this around the town and movies and like sports family, whatever, like I want to say like 500 times if they've been in English classes for like whatever, at least 5 years, 10 years, some cases 20 years of English lessons. So they've covered the same things in all the textbooks. So if you can kind of take like a regional holiday that's meaningful to you and design like a reading lesson or a speaking lesson or a listening lesson or whatever you want kind of around that holiday, I find that students really enjoy it just because it's something they've never actually learned about or talked about before. And yeah, it can kind of just be a way to like create some fun and kind of excitement in the classroom for sure. Just something interesting and new, I guess, for kind of the higher level students.
Yeah. Yeah. And depending on obviously the level, the age, like the specifics of the teaching setting, and like even other stuff like how fast paced the course is or whatever. Um, Obviously, you have to sort of work within that. But like with one time when I had just a really small class size and an oven, and I was able to get some king cake babies from home.
Yeah.
I made a king cake, and so then that tied in with like a how-to writing lesson. So I showed them like how to write out the recipe, and then they did like a how-to with a recipe because that's the basic how-to writing thing. But then at the end of the lesson, they got to taste the king cake. And then there was also like the little cultural bit with, what the baby is there for. And if you find the baby, oh, it's your responsibility to bring a cake next time.
I like that. And like I think that's actually a good thing to keep in mind. That any lesson you do, or any lesson we do, I'll say we, not you, me and you too, Jennifer, is that it should have like a learning goal or a learning outcome. So I think I've made the mistake before of just like, it's Christmas, let's watch Home Alone, and just like, you are sharing some culture and a little bit of language and whatever with the students, but what kind of learning outcome does that actually have? So that's something like sharing a favorite recipe from a holiday and then doing like a how-to lesson, and they can share, their own recipe or their own idea for something that they like to cook. I just think can work a lot better. And it's, yeah, students can actually like, they leave the class feeling like, oh, I took something tangible with me. I learned how to do this thing and like write a how to whatever, instead of just, oh, I just watched a movie and like not that much going on.
We talked about king cakes for an hour. No. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I kind of wanted to have those kind of lessons because I did teach at schools where we would take a book that was probably meant to cover like 12 lessons or 24 lessons, and we would stretch it out for like 6 months, 5 lessons a week. Yeah. And those were some painful days. And in those cases, I did a lot of stuff that did not have really proud high points of lesson planning in my life. But you kind of do what you have to do sometimes in certain situations. But if you do have, like, especially in your case, you were working in semesters where you met once, twice a week?
Yeah, usually like twice a week for about like 13 or 14 classes and 2 weeks of exams. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like 25 times ish or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want to, if you've only got 25 meetings, you don't want to spend one of them watching a movie.
Yeah.
Unless they're all super high level and somehow got stuck in a low level class or something. But
So do you think, okay, so, and what about the situation of some students that are preparing to go to Canada or the US or England or Australia or whatever? Maybe their parents got a job in one of those countries, or they're going to study abroad. Maybe they're going to do like a high school year in the US or whatever. Is it more important to teach those students about culture, kind of about the American culture, the Canadian culture, or is it more important to teach them the language and they can figure out the culture when they get there? Like, does it kind of change a little bit in situations like that, do you think?
It does in a way, but I think like teaching about like holiday culture, like that aspect of culture, I think is less important than like day-to-day interpersonal actions and communication kind of culture.
Mhm.
You know, like how do they need to talk to other people that maybe might catch them off guard. Like my students who would like get snotty with another kid because that other kid was 2 weeks younger than them and didn't use appropriately honorific
Mm,
language.
yeah.
Mean girls. Hashtag mean girls. Like yeah, if you go to the US and the first thing you do is ask everybody their birthdays, not because you want to like remember their birthday and give them a card or something,
Yeah.
but because you want to be sure that they are speaking to you as correctly and formally as you deserve, then you're not going to make
Ugh.
many friends.
No, that is bad.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I taught some students who were getting ready. They were very high level students and they were getting ready to do internships in the US for like a year or something, or 6 months or a year or whatever. And they had these kind of like intensive English classes. And they were kind of getting into like a big thing. Like they had to go to a US city, like rent an apartment and like make friends and start this job. And it was kind of like, so I saw my role as kind of like I was helping to guide them. Like, here's where you can look for apartments. Here's the popular websites, and here are some like common scams that like people do to like take advantage of like newbie foreigners. And then also with the language, yeah, I tried to help them kind of just be like normal people who were just talking normally. Like if I came into class and I would say like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And if anyone said, "I'm fine, thank you, and you," which is the Korean answer, I would shut it down so hard. I was like, no, we are absolutely never saying that again. You're going to sound so bad when you go to like the US and say that. So I would say, like teach them, oh, you could say like, "I'm good, I'm all right, oh, I'm fine, like I'm happy," whatever. They could give a range of answers. But yeah, I kind of just saw it as like anytime they said something that was very confusing or that I just knew wouldn't go over well in the US, I would try to help them and just kind of give them some better, less awkward ways, I guess, of interacting because they've never had a chance to try out that language. Like in the world of the US, they had some people like me. I was from Canada, or I'm from Canada, so they could try it out on me, but I was very patient and would just answer even if it was very awkward. So I would, I kind of tried to change my style of teaching and just would like be a little bit, I was still patient, but I would just say, "Oh, hey, that's like a very offensive thing to say," or "That's like very awkward," or like, so I really tried to help them out with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's very intense. That's very brave of your students to um, not just pick up and move to a new country for a job opportunity, but then have to navigate like setting up their own accommodation and having to, um, yeah, just take care of everything on their own. Like it would be so much easier if whatever program they were with, if they were with a program, helped them, or their employer helped them organize some housing or something.
Yeah, I know I felt worried about them all the time. So I did my best. I think there was three of us that were teaching in that program, and all of us were like very serious about like, here is how you do all the things, like running them through scenarios. Like, yeah, it's just, I think we were all kind of nervous for them, but they were all like very smart, capable people who
Yeah.
they were like all in their senior year of university. And yeah, I think, and they all spoke English very well. So I think they probably did fine, but like, um, yeah, it was an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah. Wow.
So Jennifer, so what if someone says to you, "My role is a cultural ambassador," and they are heading over to some other country to teach English? Would you just would you try to like kind of gently persuade them that that wasn't best thing, or just let them just go and be how they're going to be? Or so like kind of what would you do in that situation?
I think I would probably try to gently probe to see what they meant by that. Because, like, for example, Spain has a teaching program that, like, the easiest way to get a visa to live and work in Spain, if you're North American, is their, oh, what is it? No,
I know exactly what you're talking
North
about.
American Language Cultural Ambassador Program. Like, it's literally got cultural ambassador in the title. And like, technically they're teaching assistants, but like part of their role is considered to be cultural ambassadors. So if that's what they meant, if they meant that they were going to go and be a teaching assistant and basically do the head teacher's bidding or whatever, which is how it actually pans out in a lot of those Spanish teaching job or Spanish ESL jobs, then fine. But if they're coming at it from a feeling of cultural superiority and, yeah, that just makes me think of when I was in high school, my mom got remarried, and my mom is quite religious. And if you're remarried, you can't take communion in the Catholic Church. So she converted to this kind of fundamentalist Episcopalian church. And they were really, generally speaking, nice people. Like, our house flooded. We got like a meter of water in our house, and they came and donated all the materials and donated the labor or whatever. And they like fixed the walls in our house and fixed the floors in our house and like all this stuff. And that was really amazing. They had some super weird crap that they did as well. And also, they were super into missionary work. Like, they would always have a handful of missionary families that the church was supporting in places like the Solomon Islands and whatever. And periodically, those people would come back and sort of report all the good work they were doing, and lots of ambassadorial stuff, taking the good word, not only of their Lord and Savior, but also the good word of how sweet life is in a capitalist paradise.
There's something, I think the Canadian in me just is like so horrified by that. It's like we grew up learning Canada is a multicultural country and everyone's free to speak their own language and have their own religions and dress how they want to dress, where the US is more of like like the melting pot. People are expected to assimilate to like kind of a monocultural society. So it's like I think Canadians and Americans have vastly different views about that kind of thing generally. So that's why that story I shared at the beginning of saying, let's talk about language and culture and our role as cultural ambassadors. And she was very American in the way she was talking, and I was very Canadian. So I just was like, oh, like that's just not how Canadians grow up. So it's like, yeah, we just kind of grew up like learning to accept all cultures as equal, and no culture is better than. I think that's a key thing actually to remember, is that no culture is better or worse than any other culture. Everyone has their, every culture has their good points, their bad points, their things that they struggle with. And it's just different. It's not necessarily better or worse. So no matter where you are in the world or where you're going or what culture you yourself are from, definitely keep in mind it's different. It's not better or worse. And I think you'll kind of go far in the world of, English teaching. And those who don't have that attitude, I think, struggle for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Even as a teenager who had not seen the world, I thought that was pretty horrific. And that church was definitely very much the kind of church that if you read a different version of the Bible, you were going to hell. Like they were
No.
that precise of this is the
Yeah.
narrow lane that you have to live in. So
Yeah.
I can only imagine what they were doing in their missionary work, but I imagine there was a lot of
Yeah.
teaching the good word of America is the greatest country on earth.
Mm. Okay, so here's a question, Jennifer, that I just thought of that I'm curious to know your answer. So we kind of had the rise of like all the apps, the translation apps and everything. Do people actually need to be learning English? Like, I feel like it's kind of, at least in Asia, it's this kind of obsession with like everybody learning English. Is it even really necessary these days? I'm kind of, I used to think it was, but now I'm kind of leaning more towards like, I don't actually know. I don't actually know the answer to that anymore.
I think it depends on like the person. Like if you are someone who never deals with foreigners, and I don't just mean English speaking foreigners, because in a lot of like business context or professional context, English is the common language.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't need that, then you should learn whatever language you want to learn,
Mm-hmm.
or no language if that's what
Something
makes you
else.
happy. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about like I don't know how Canada is, but in the US, like every university will have evening leisure courses where the adjunct teachers are earning a little extra money with, Italian for food lovers and,
Mm-hmm.
French poetry or whatever. Like
Yeah.
it's purely for fun and enjoyment and what you want to learn. And, I know a couple people, one of my friends' daughters is pretty serious about self-studying Korean because she loves K-pop. But I know like other adults as well, they've gotten really into K-dramas and
Mm-hmm.
they have been inspired to study a bit of Korean. I think a bit of Korean is probably the operative phrase, but in the US, we just study language almost solely because it makes us happy. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that as the standard of things like Google Translate or whatever gets better and better, then that will become more common in places unless it's a workplace requirement. My
Mm-hmm.
husband works in a multicultural office. He is the only native English speaker, but everyone is from different countries. And so the office is in English.
Yeah, so I guess it always will be a requirement. There's something about like face-to-face communication, I think that's kind of like key for really facilitating business deals or even like personal relationships, way more than, talking into an app and then the app spits whatever out and then the other person responds to the app and spits it out, something like that. It's just less personal, I think. So yeah, I think there always will be the role of English and then the role of English teachers. One thing that
Sorry,
I think,
sorry, I just have to interrupt that speaking into the app. Have you ever seen or heard of the show 90 Day Fiancé?
no, no,
Oh, it's an American, of course, reality show
yeah,
where people are coming over on 90-day fiancé visas, which, if you're not familiar, in the US, you can get a fiancé visa and you have 90 days to get married. And then your visa, I don't think they're extendable. I think if you have not gotten married, you gotta get out. And I've only seen it a couple times because
yeah.
I don't really watch TV, but like I've seen it on planes or something. And yeah, there have been couples that are literally like talking into their phone and then putting the phone over for the other person to hear. And like it's so clearly a case that they saw each other on holiday. They were like, "You're hot. Oh, you're hot."
Let's
and
get married.
American. Cool. You know?
Mm.
And yeah, so they're just like, their whole relationship is talking into an app.
Seems sketchy. Seems sketchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough at times for sure. So something that I wanted to just discuss briefly is native English speakers as English teachers around the world. And I know Jennifer and I both had taught in Korea for a number of years. And I think we both kind of started at the heyday of the native English speaker in Korea. It was like jobs were like falling off trees, basically. And you wanted a job, you could be in Korea like 2 days later, like something like that. Like it was actually really very easy to get a job. And so everybody was hiring. There was an English craze. Now these days it's actually way harder to get a job in Korea. I think it's part of the K-pop thing. I think it's simply demographics. There's actually like less kids and less funding for public schools and that kind of thing. I just wonder if maybe the heyday of the native English speaker, English teacher is maybe done. I'm maybe in some countries there's probably still it's going strong, but I just kind of think that maybe just a change of tastes as well. Like, people don't necessarily want a cultural ambassador. They can get by with like a Korean English teacher probably as well, just as well.
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things. One, like even I think 2011, 2012, I had to do a like a trial lesson. Like I was in Korea and the students were in Korea, but they were remote from where I was. And I think my school was trying to get a contract, and it was a complete garbage dumpster fire of a lesson because I was literally told it was one of those Korean specials 5 minutes before, come with me. And I was put in a cubicle and she was like, you're going to teach a lesson online now. I had not been shown any software. I had to use my mouse to write. It was so horrible.
That does
and I
sound
think
bad.
their actual teacher was just like, ooh, party time, peace. And as soon as class started, they jetted and they were like, yep, be back in 40 minutes.
Oh, no.
It was so horrible. Surprise, surprise. I don't think the contract came through. In any case, I was never asked to teach another lesson like that. But that was, over 10 years ago. And certainly now, post-pandemic, everyone has seen how much is possible with the technology available now, that you don't have to be face-to-face. So they can get foreign teachers without having the expense of bringing a foreign teacher over, without the hassle of visas, without the expense of a full-time employee. They can just have somebody who's 1 or 2 hours a week, and they can change it every week as enrollment fluctuates or whatever. So I do think it's going to become less and less common. But also, back to what you're saying about the heyday being over, my goodness, is that true? I don't know if you are in any Facebook groups still that post jobs for Korea.
Yeah, so I don't follow them closely, but a little bit, yeah.
They are, wages are lower than I earned in 2003, and the hours are longer. And the standard is now a one-way ticket at best, like a return ticket at the end of your contract. Whereas it used to be, they would purchase a ticket on your behalf, a round trip ticket. And a lot of schools are offering like 300,000 won a month housing allowance, which
instead of free housing,
instead of free housing, but also 300,000 a month.
It's like 250 USD or something like that.
Yeah, like $300. The last apartment I rented, I put down 10 million key money, so 10,000 US dollars as my deposit, and I still paid 600,000 a month. And these were not fancy. One was in Itaewon, and one was in way North Seoul in like a university area. And it was normally, they had students living there. Like they were quite surprised that I turned up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jennifer, I think maybe we've kind of talked about everything that we can talk about culture and language, but we do have a question from somebody just to kind of change topics here. So we'll do our best. If anyone has any questions for us about anything like teaching English, learning English, we'll do our best to help you out. So it's just kind of like a free question time. So out of topic question, but what do we recommend to help his students, his or her, I'm going to use his, maybe help his students read more fluently? So my thoughts about helping students read fluently is extensive reading is key to this. You don't get good at things without practicing things, sports, musical instruments, English skills. So extensive reading is when students read just for fun, something that they're interested in. And the key is that it should be at like a slightly lower level than they're at. So they don't have to like get out their dictionaries every like third word or struggle to understand the grammar. So if your students are serious about getting better at English reading, they have to find a novel, like a graded reader, a magazine, a newspaper article, just kind of whatever they're at, and just read things for fun every day if possible. You can also do this in class. So like maybe the 15 minutes at the end of every class or the beginning of each class, you have a little bit of a library in your classroom, and the students can just read for fun in your class. Jennifer, do you have any other advice or thoughts?
I do. I want to reiterate extensive reading, extensive reading, extensive reading. And err on the side of something slightly lower level. That is definitely an area where you don't want to push them to try and just push it a little bit. No, this is for extensive reading. You want to kind of pull it back a little, and so that they don't have to stop and think about every word, every word. Another, like one exercise that I would suggest doing is like reading the same passage multiple times. Like if you're doing like a reading fluency activity, have a short passage, and what is short will depend on the fluency of your students already. Like if your students are lower level, then just a couple of sentences maybe. But then if they're more advanced, obviously something a little bit longer. But I would say probably no more than a page, and just have them read that passage a couple of times as like a timed activity. And like the first time, give them long enough that you think that the slowest student should be able to finish it. And then cut a little bit of time off and then read it a couple of times in a row and see if they can read it a little bit faster and still finish it. And then again, a little bit faster and still finish it. And it just gets them used to increasing their reading speed, because at first they're going to be picking out each word with their eyes. And obviously to read and comprehend, you have to like visually chunk the information. And so they need to just get in the habit of moving their eyes faster and still taking in the information. And a way to do that is to read the same passage a couple of times in the same sitting. So what do you think about that?
And yes, I just posted for you in the chat. I have a video about how to plan an ESL reading lesson. It's just a few minutes long, and I kind of give some simple steps. So I do like the idea of reading it one more time, or like more than once. The CELTA kind of way, or like the TEFL teaching kind of way that you would learn, is to have students read it very quickly for gist, like kind of just to pick out the main ideas. So give students a very simple reading task, like just answering like maybe 2 or 3 very simple true or false questions, Or like, for example, if it's someone talking about or they're at a restaurant and they're ordering food, just say like, find 2 things that they want to eat at that restaurant or whatever. So you pick out very simple things and very quickly go over those answers. And then in the second reading, students would have kind of more detailed comprehension questions, which they read first, and then they read for detail in the second time. So no matter how you do it, reading things more than once with kind of different aims or different goals, I think is key to helping students, read more fluently, for sure. So whatever way you do it, it's up to you. But yeah, there's different methods, and all of them involve reading a lot or reading more than once, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
And mix it up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, not the same old thing all the time. One interesting thing that I like to do is have students like read the headline of an article or whatever that I'm going to use in the lesson, and then make a prediction about what the article is about, and then have them quickly read to see if kind of their prediction is confirmed or not. So it gives, basically you need to give students a reason to read something. That's the other key thing that I should have mentioned earlier. Students need a reason to read. So if you just give them something and say, read this, and just, okay, whatever, it's like, they're not actually like taking it in. They just, whatever, it's just a nothing activity. But if they have a reason and they're invested in it, you're going to get better results for sure.
Yeah. Oh, and like a modern thing that you could do, and this isn't a reading activity necessarily, although it could be. But if you wanted to do like a listening activity, like have some really clickbaity title YouTube video, and then watch the video and see if the clickbaity title was accurate, if it teased something that was actually in there. And of course, you can also find clickbaity title news stories or other articles on the internet.
For sure. All right, Jennifer, we gave some great advice. Give ourselves a pat on the back. Perfect. Okay, thanks so much. I'm happy that you appreciated that. All right, so thanks for stopping by, everyone. I think that maybe brings us to the end. And if you have any topics that you'd like us to talk about or things you would like us to discuss, we're totally like open to ideas. We've been doing our podcast for a while, so sometimes it feels like we've talked about like every possible thing there is to talk about related to ESL teaching, but I don't think we have. That can't be true.
No.
So please ask us questions or give us any ideas, and we're happy to talk about it. Yeah, thanks for sharing this time with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, bye everyone. Catch you next time.
Bye, see you next time.